Okay, there. It says that it's recording, so I'm just gonna trust that it
Okay.
works.
Yeah. Let's trust the recorder.
We just do this, and then it turns out, oh no, Ball had messed up everything.
Yeah. Rip. Okay. But yeah,
Hmm.
let's start.
Okay, so we're gonna be talking about Fire Emblem villains, right?
Yeah, we're going to talk about Fire Emblem and the Fire Emblem villains. It's funny because, like, oftentimes in the FE fandom, like, people say that the villains are, like, worst part of FE, and, well, I kind of agree because, like, usually in Nintendo games, the villains are, like, the best part or the best characters. Like, I think everyone can agree that Bowser is a more interesting character than Mario, for
Yeah.
instance. But like in Fire Emblem, it's more like the villains are more like hit or miss. Like some of the best villains in Fire Emblem are best characters in the entire series, but then the worst villains are kind of like forgettable or plot devices. So like it's kind of like two extremes. Like it's hit or miss, more or less.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can definitely agree that like you have your standout villains that everyone remembers, and then you have the other
Yeah,
villains that
everyone.
like
Yeah,
you're lucky if anyone ever brings them up in a conversation.
yeah, basically. Like you have those ones that like people like really like and everyone remembers and like are the highlight of the game usually.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain villains that when people bring up the game, they bring up the villain and they're synonymous with the game. You know what I'm talking about, but let's not. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So like do we just like do we go them game by game or do we go like the villains in like archetypes or like how do you
We can kind of like briefly go through the games.
yeah, to the games.
Yeah.
Okay, so we start with the first one then. We start with the March games. We start with Shadow Dragon. Which
Actually,
was
it's Shadow Dragon and the Blade of Light. Shadow Dragon is the
yeah,
remake.
yeah, but technically the same game.
I know.
Technically
I
the
know.
same.
I'm just being dumb.
Yeah, yeah. So I think like Shadow Dragon like really has like two main villains. Like there is like sure there is the Emperor guy, but like he was like super forgettable, so like he doesn't really even count. But like there's Gonef and then there's Medius, and they both kind of like started the whole archetypes of like Gonef being the first evil sorcerer
Hmm.
and Medius being the first evil dragon guy. So yeah, I guess we start talking about them. Like, what do you think about them?
Um. Okay, so for the first game in the franchise, I think that they're actually like a really solid start. Like they're
Hmm.
simplistic because in general, Marth's games are basic. It's just like, oh hey, your kingdom was invaded. You have to take your kingdom back and then protect the rest of the continent. So it's simple, and the villains
Right.
are also simple. But
Yeah, I
at the same time, I think that there's also like an extra layer of depth to them, especially Garneth.
mm.
I really like Garneth.
Yeah, same here. Like, I personally feel that, well, I do have big issues with the Gonif archetype later on. I think that Gonif himself is a really solid start. Sure, he is relatively simple, especially when you compare to some of the later games and their villains. But I feel that for the time, he was pretty good, and it still is pretty good.
Hmm.
Like, I think that he lays a solid foundation to the archetype, and I really like that. I like how he is the sinister evil wizard guy that will, like, gives tension to the plot. Like otherwise, it would be just we need the same or kingdom from this evil empire attacking. But like Garnet being there, it adds more spice and more complexity and makes it more than just the simple save the kingdom plot
Yeah.
that it would be. And well, personally, I don't like Medius as much as Garnet because I feel that Medius is kind of a non-character, kind of like this evil dragon king who you have to like destroy. But at the same time, I think that Medius does have an interesting backstory. If you read it through the lines, like he does have some complexity and layer to it, but at the same time, he kinda is just a big evil dragon emperor king.
Hmm.
The one thing that I actually find kind of unique about Medius is that he's more. He has an human form and a clear human form because, like later on, the evil dragon kings and Alpha was more demon than a dragon. So they are more monster-like, and
Yeah.
and if they have a human form, it's via possession. Medius, he does have a human form, and that's something that I think makes him distinct and makes him interesting and stand out compared to the other evil dragons in the series. And sure, the only other dragon that really has a human form is Duma, I think. And even then, that's just in the remake.
Yeah, that is a nice detail to him that he has a human form and he does have
Mm.
compared to like the other evil dragons, he is the more human of them. He has a lot of human like qualities and traits. Also, something that you said about like how he has like hidden depth to him if you read through the lines. I think that's a pretty common theme in Fire Emblem. Is a lot of the villains it's all in the subtext. It's all in the dialogue, in the boss conversations, the lore. That's where the big background is. In story, they're kind of basic.
Yeah, I think that a lot of villains, with a few exceptions, so like I think that a lot of the villains, like if you like just read the game, you think them as like simple evil bad guys. But if you like read actually the villain dialogue, read the lore, and piece it out, then they're actually more complex and have more interesting motivations. And I think that a lot of the Garnet archetypes are a really good example. Like a lot of the evil wizards really fall into this. They seem really simplistic and evil for the rules, but then you read their backstory that's heavily implied in some kind of boss conversation, and then you realize that, wait a minute, this character is actually pretty complex and interesting. Even if sometimes that information is hidden in an optional hard mode. Well, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Well, we can yell at that when we get there. I think we both have a lot to say about that.
Yeah, and also something interesting about Medius, if we like return to Medius before this derails. So it's the fact that he's not some kind, because usually evil dragons like your Lopters, your Dumas, and so on, they are usually gods or on the level of god, on the level of Demon Dragon, on the level of Naga. Medius, he's just a normal Manakiti. He's just someone like Tiki or Bantu or Goto. He's just like on the level of them. He's not on the level of Naga. And that's something that I actually really found interesting, personally.
Yeah, it's a nice differentiation between him and the other dragons. Like it shows how it sort of it keeps escalating. Like at first it was just like, oh, he's a dragon. Then it's like, oh, he's a divine dragon. And it's like, oh, he's like one of the first dragons. And, you know, it just keeps getting
and then you get into Ashera, and then you get into Ashera, who's basically goddess of the whole world. And after that, it kind of like dialed down, like Grima's evil experiment thing, and Rhea is just a Nabatean, which is basically a Manakiti in Chaos universe. So but up until Radiant Dawn, it just kept escalating and escalating and escalating and escalating, and then you get Ashera, and after that, it kind of dialed down a bit.
Yeah, that's kind of like it's kind of like the peak. That's as high as they can go, and then it's like, okay, let's bring it down a little bit. Let's get back to like just standard dragons.
Yeah, just standard dragons. Yeah. Do you have like anything more to say about either Medius or Gonaf? I think
that kind of covers them. Like I said, they're simple because really Marth's game is simple at its core. It's very basic.
Yeah, like I think that one thing that I really want to bring up about Gonaf is his backstory, or the whole idea that he was like a failed couple of Gotos who like got super power hungry, and I really like the backstory. It's really simple, but like it worked very well.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think we have them warped up. So do we now go into guidance/echoes, or do we go into I think guidance/echoes.
Yeah, guidance/echoes. Yeah. So that would be Rudolph and Duma.
Rudolph and Duma. This is Birgit Terracer. This is Birgit Terracer. People will be so mad if we don't talk about Birgit. It's like he's one of the fan favorites.
Yeah.
So like,
also Jeddah.
Yeah. Also, we can talk about him.
I forgot he existed actually until I just right now.
Yeah, like he's like Jeddah's like kind of like he's just there, but at the same time he's not that bad. Like I think he has a decent motivation, and like he's one of the better Garnafs. Like I don't think he's as good as Garnaf or some of the other Garnafs, but he's not as frustrating as say Negril or Gordon's. Like he's like decently executed and has a decent motivation, but he isn't like the best in my opinion. Like he's in the most interesting. Like his motivation of like why he does the things he does is pretty interesting, and he's pretty simplistic, but has like you don't need your villains always to be like these super complex and deep. And I feel that when we talk about how Fire Emblem often has the villains be like really simplistic, but then they are actually more complex. So I think Jedi is pretty good example of that. Like he is the standard evil wizard guy, but like he's a bit more than that. And I
Yeah.
really like he's decent. Like
Yeah, I feel like he does have like extra layers to him that people don't really like talk about. One thing that I
yeah,
like about him, one part specifically, is sort of his connection to like Sonya and like all of the witches on Celica's path.
really, I really like that too. Like I personally feel that one problem Farm really suffers with these villains is like how they usually don't make them that personal to the protagonist. Like sure, you have like this big guy, bad guy killed the character's main parents, so of course they want revenge. But usually, Fire Emblem really sucks at making like the villains feel more personal to the main protagonists or even some
Hmm.
side characters. So that's something I really like about it. Is his connection to Sonya and the witches, and that I really like. It like adds a really nice layer. And also the way he plays Celicia like a fiddle is just so. I know some people are frustrated with the way Celicia acts, but also it makes sense. Like you characters acting rationally wouldn't make the most interesting story. Yeah,
Yeah,
when we talked about him, so let's now go to the other ones. Let's talk about Rudolph and Duma and later on Barket.
yeah,
Yeah, I feel that Rudolph kind of like with what we talked about, Konov and Brius kind of falls into the he was the first one of his archetype. Like sure, Shadow Dragon had an evil emperor, but like they were kind of like forgettable. Like I don't even know if they had an actual name or a proper characterization, and weren't that important in the plot. But, like Rudolph was an actual force. He was an actual antagonist, and I really like that. I really feel that like with the other two, there has been more like complex examples of his archetype, but at the same time, he was a really good foundation to his archetype. Like, that's basic that you can later on build on as the games went on. And I personally really like that about Rudolph.
hmm I agree. One thing that I really like about him is
Mhm.
it's not it's not delved into too much until like
Mhm.
the very end, until we
Mhm.
personally fight him, and then it's revealed, oh,
Mhm.
he's Om's father.
Mhm.
But I do like the fact that he's not just an evil emperor. Like he's fighting for a good cause. He's doing things for a
I
good
really like,
reason.
yeah, I really like that too. And I feel that that's something that usually rings true for the evil emperor archetype in Fire Emblem, that they usually have a reason for doing what they're doing.
Hmm.
And they have like a noble cause. Like, sure, there are some exceptions. Looking at you, Oshnard, but like usually the evil emperor archetype, so they usually have a reason for doing what they're doing, and that's really neat. And I feel that that's another thing that Rudolph like layered on or like started. And his connection to Olm is also really cool because, like we said, usually Fire Emblem villains don't really have a connection with the main characters, so that was really neat.
Yeah.
Mm. As for Duma, I feel he is decent. Like he's pretty good. Like he isn't like my favorite villain ever in the series or anything, but I think that because especially like the way his mindset or the whole worldview, that was really interesting. And his whole backstory with Milan, how they both kind of like were um, these dragons that got banished to the gate BBL because they were a bit naughty and fought too much. That was really nice.
Yeah.
And I feel that like with Did Duma is like pretty much a decent like follow up to the previous character, like to the Medius archetype. Like he isn't like the most interesting of the bunch, but at the same time he isn't like someone that makes me incredibly frustrated like some of the later archetypes. Like he does his job and he does it pretty well.
I really wish they had explored more the relationship with him and Milla and sort of like their
Yeah,
contrasting ideologies. Because they set
yeah,
up,
that's
oh,
like
Milla's nurturing and kind and wants to protect everyone, whereas Zuma is more the strong will inherit the earth and you have to fight
yeah,
to be worthy. And
yeah,
that's a really interesting conflict of ideologies because both of them
yeah.
want
It's
the same
really
thing. They want what's best for their
yeah.
people. They just believe something different is what's best for
Yeah,
them.
that's something that I really like. Like they have like this same end goal but in different ways, and I wish that the game had went to a bit further. Like, sure, Echoes does, if I recall, Echoes does explore it more, but at the same time, I feel it doesn't explore enough. And sure, the game already has a lot of plot, so I understand why they didn't. But at the same time, I wish that in the game's main plot had more depth into the story and
Hmm.
into the relationship with the dragons. Like I wish they had like tackled it a little bit more.
Yeah. Like if we saw them interact more, because Milla's barely even in the story. She's mostly just like referenced in flashbacks. She's not actually a
Yeah,
presence.
she isn't like. Didn't she like die pretty early on, if I recall correctly?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure she's just like dead most
Yeah,
of it.
she. Yeah, that sucks. Like I wish like they had the dragons and their ideologies more present because like it's one of the more interesting concepts for the
Hmm.
dragon characters, having them actually represent philosophies and having like neither is truly good or evil because usually in Fire Emblem you really have like a clear good dragon and a clear evil dragon, but here it's like more muddled, and I really like that because like I don't think you can say that neither Mila or Duma is purely evil or good. It's more like their methods are more or less.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
It's a conflict of ideologies and methods, but their end goals are very similar.
Yeah. And that's something that I really like and like also frustrates me of Fire Emblem that I really like when Fire Emblem like makes things more complex and makes ideologies more complex. But I also feel that usually when they try to do that, it's kind of like they have to like backpedal it or like don't explore it as much.
Yeah. Yeah, I
Yeah.
agree.
Yeah. And yeah, now before we move on, we should talk about Beckett, I think.
Oh
The
yeah,
fan
yeah, for sure.
favorite. The fan favorite. Or do we also find out that we just do Beckett?
They're kind of similar-ish.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, like Beckett is the more popular, so yeah.
Yeah.
If you have something to say about Fernand, so go ahead, but like
I don't know. I really like the addition in Echoes because I mean I never played Gaiden. I was like,
yeah.
this game is old.
Yeah, it is really old. But yeah, I feel that Beckett and Fernand, especially Beckett, are like really good additions to Echo's story and like
Hmm.
they're really cool. And
Yeah.
also Beckett is like one of those characters that when we talked early on, like those standard characters, like he has this really complex personality and like this really interesting character arc and the way how he like becomes like consumed with his I'm going to be the best and I'm going to be
He's
the
such a good foil to Alm.
yeah,
Like
he is like
the arcs that they go through are parallel and they're also contrasting because whereas Alm sort of like grows to accept who he is and grow into his role, Berku kind of like loses himself and he loses who he is because he gives up his old I'm going to use my own strength and he uses the dark magic to get power and
yeah, because like
he gives up the person that he loves just to make himself strong enough. So Alm's
yeah,
journey is a journey of discovery, whereas his journey is more falling into madness because he doesn't know
yeah,
who
like
he is
he
anymore.
loses yeah, like he loses himself and loses everything that meant to him because like he really like he's obsessed with the idea that he needs to be the strongest, so
Hmm.
he like loses himself in his goal,
Yeah,
and that's
and
really tragic. And I really like that. I feel
yeah,
that he's
and
really
when he finds out that like he's not when he finds out he's not going to be the next ruler, when he finds out he's not next in line for the throne, he really just his entire worldview is shattered. He doesn't know what to
yeah.
believe anymore.
And that kind of like starts his full losing himself because he lost his
Hmm.
purpose. He thought he was going to be the next girl. When that wasn't the case, it started a slippery slope that led him losing pretty much everything about him.
Yeah.
I'm like, this isn't really related to Belgrade, or it kind of is. Like, I know that a lot of people don't like when a female character is used as an accessory or as a way to develop a male character. I personally really like Rinea in that role because, like, I feel that Birgit's character won't work without a character like Rinea, a character who more or less is a moral compass to Birgit, like a character that kind of like keeps sanity, and when he and when he loses her, he loses pretty much everything, and that's left of his humanity and sanity. And I know that some people think that like writing female characters like that is sexist, and I can see why. But at the same time, Becca can like needs a character that represents his humanity for his character to work and for his arc to work. And I feel that Rinea does his purpose in the story pretty well.
Yeah. Yeah, she fits that role well, and she's kind of like his anchor to reality. She's always comforting him, telling him it'll be okay, things will be fine, we have each other. And so when
Yep.
he gives her up, he basically gives up the last sense of sanity that he has, his last tie to reality.
Yep, exactly. Like TV tropes has this term or trope called morality chain, which is more or less what you described, and Renea is more or less like that. She is
Mhm.
his anchor. She is his last bits of humanity, and I really like that.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see why he's a fan favorite character. He's one of my
Yeah,
favorite villains. I really
definitely
I
is.
love his arc. I love his characteristics. The fact that Echoes has voice acting is a solid touch because I always feel voice acting gives an extra layer to the characters.
Same
Like
here.
when you hear their delivery, it's very different from you reading it and giving your own interpretation of the delivery.
Exactly. Like the delivery is really good. Like I feel that Burke's voice acting really adds to his characterization and makes him more complex. Like
Yeah.
he's already a really well written and complex character. The voice acting is just a cherry on the top.
Yeah, because you can feel his pain. You can feel like
exactly.
what he's going through.
Like, yeah, exactly. Like I feel the most iconic line is well, lies, lies, you lies, lies. So that performance is just so perfect. And
Yeah.
like it's super mimetic, but also it's really tragic in a way.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, on to the next game. I was like, are we finally going to talk about Jack Drop? But then I remember that Harding exists.
Dang, you forgot about Hardin.
Yeah, I actually really like Harding, so it isn't. I'm just like really jiggy to get like Jack Drop villains because I know I have a lot to say about Jack Drop and its villains, so I'm just like really excited.
Everyone has a lot to say about Jugdrill. No one ever shuts up about it.
Yeah, like Jugdrill is a fan favorite for a good reason.
Yeah.
Also, like it's one of the Fire Emblems that I probably have the most mixed feelings about when it comes to its story and world and the characters. Like I really like it, but at the same time, I really dislike some parts of it. Yeah. Maybe we should talk about Harding first before
we move on again.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that Harding is pretty good. Like I feel that because I haven't played Mystery of Emblem yet, and as such, I haven't experienced him yet. So like, I don't really have a clear opinion on him, or like I think that when I play the game, I will like him more, or that he could easily be one of my favorites, or at least one of the better villains for me. But at the same time, what I know about Harding, I really like. Like I feel that Harding like took the foundation of the Rudolph evil emperor character and like built it more and made it even more personal or more tragic. While Rudolph kind of started well-intended extremist, Harding more or less started tragic villain that once was a noble man but then fell into misery. Kind of like with Burkett, like Harding kind of like started that full archetype or sub-archetype of Fire Emblem villains, I feel.
Yeah. I really love him for one reason, because he's a unique villain in the sense that since it's one of the very rare cases where it's a direct sequel to a previous game, we know who he is. He was
Yeah,
one of
like
our units in the first game. Like we fought
yeah, I
with
really
him.
like that. Like he was one of our allies in the previous game, and I personally really liked it too. Like you know who he was, and then you can like see his downfall. Well, not in the first perspective, but still. And that's something I really like, and I wish the Fire Emblem did more was like introduce characters who start off as heroic and characters you actually use
Hmm.
and work on your side, but then like they fall into madness and then they become villains later on. And
Yeah.
we have had two other cases, this, and we will get to them. And there are actually two of my personal favorites, or like one of them is one of my
Hmm.
personal favorites. The one that isn't a discourse magnet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, but
the other
yeah,
thing that
like
I like about him is sort of not just Marth's relationship with him, because since Marth is the main character, he's who we relate to the most in terms of the story, but all of the supporting characters, all of the other units. Like
yeah, like they do
whenever you
have
have to
like
recruit them, they're like, I don't want to fight him. He's my friend. Especially the other members of the Wolf Guard. They're like, we swore loyalty to him. We swore our lives for him, and now we have to fight against him. Like
yeah,
you
that's really
feel
true.
you really
Yeah,
feel
you feel
the
that pain.
struggle.
Yeah, like this was a noble man once, and he was driven to madness, and that's
Yeah.
really sad. And this is actually one of the other reasons I really hope that we get more examples of this, because like, uh, it is really complex to have this character who once was really noble and really good person, and then have them to like be corrupted both literally by being possessed by a evil dragon, but also figuratively by falling into madness because he lost the person he loved.
Hmm.
And I really like that, but also I feel that because the mod games are pretty simple, even Mystery of the Emblem, even if it's more complex than Shadow Dragon, it's still pretty simple. But so I kind of like wish we had more like villains that started as heroes, so we could like get this more complex and get this even more complex than it was before,
Yeah.
and build on it like other archetypes have been built on. But yeah, Harden is really good, especially for his time.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mm.
I think Harden was kind of like where the transition sort of started from more simple villains to a little more complex, because he's still
Yeah.
simple. He's just like, he was corrupted by darkness. He succumbed to evil, but he's also complex in the sense that we know who he is. We know
Mm.
he has a heart. We know that he's a
Yeah.
good person, and we have to fight against him despite everything
Yeah,
we've
and
been
that's
through.
really tragic. And that's really tragic.
Hmm.
But yeah, Harding was like the kind of like the transition point of like the Fire Emblem villains became even more complex, and like he started a lot of archetypes or like recurring trends that we would see being evolved later on.
Yeah, he was also the first like really sympathetic villain, because Rudolph had
Yeah,
a little bit of sympathy, but not too much. But for him, the entire time you really feel bad for him.
yeah,
You feel
exactly.
awful having to fight him and having to go to war with
Mm.
him.
And that's really sad. And like he was really like a really important villain in a way that would change the way that Fire Emblem villains were portrayed. And
Hmm.
like he's a really good character on his own, but like when you think about his impact and how like without him we may not have some of the better villains in the series, like even Bakut like kind of like has held back to him. So that alone like makes him one of the best villains in the series. Like when you think about his impact on the entire series.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Mm. Yeah. Like, if there's one thing I don't like is well, he got possessed by a dragon, but at the same time, like it was like at time, so you can understand why that was a thing, and also his whole motivation wasn't just because of the dragon. Like he was already like susceptible for influence, and there was like other reasons too
Hmm.
why he became that way. So like it isn't just the dragon.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Like the person that he loved didn't
Mm.
love him back, and so
And that's
he was kind of just stuck there.
yeah, like he was really desperate, and that's like really understandable.
Yeah.
Like of like being in that place. Yeah, I think that's all we have to say about Harden.
Mm-hmm.
So now we get into Drugland. Oh boy, I know that I have so much to say. Like, I know that, like, while we otherwise have a pretty similar taste in villains, and like even if we like have minor like differences, I know that this is the one that we have the most differences
Yeah,
in.
yeah. This is the biggest disagreements in terms of what they did with the characters and how they approached it.
Yeah, like this is the one like where I like a character you don't really like, and you like a character I like. I probably dislike the most, like of all Fire Emblem villains, in all honesty.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So like, where do we stop? Because like Dracula has like a truckload of villains. Like,
Oh yeah,
we
it
probably will.
really does.
Yeah. And also, neither of us have played Thracia, so we aren't going to Thracia villains. Just putting this to like the 5 hardcore Thracia fans, if they are listening.
I have to. I said I was gonna play that game, and it's been like 2 years since I said that. I'm terrible.
Yeah. Yeah, like I'm going to play that game eventually, but like it's one of the hardest Fire Emblem games, so I'm just dreading it.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So where do we start with? Do I
I
start with my
guess.
hot take? Do I start with my hot take? Hot take of
Go ahead. Go ahead. Throw it out. Go ahead. Throw it out.
I
Get,
don't like Arvis. I don't like Arvis. Like everyone likes Arvis, but I don't. Like I get it. Like Arvis was a good villain for his time. Like for his time, I get that Arvis was really interesting and really complex and that. Like if you compare him now and compare him to some of the more recent villains, so like I don't get when people say Arvis is the most complex and most nuanced and most interesting villain with the most sympathetic motivation when he's just a kid with daddy issues who basically decided, yeah, let's team up with this evil dark magic cult because my dad was a terrible person. And like I personally get Arvis' character and the idea behind him and stuff like that. But I feel that Arvis is one of the characters that suffers from the fact that Juggler is a game for the SNES and as such couldn't tell its story to the fullest extent because like he only like appears 2 times and then he kills before he kills Sigurd. And like I feel that Arvis' character to work, he maybe needed to appear a bit more frequently. So like you had a more clear idea. Like you do have a clear idea in the game, but just it doesn't feel the same as with some other characters. Or even with Hardin, like Hardin was like a playable character for the whole freaking game. Always just shows up a few times, says hello Sigurd, and then he betrays him. Like I don't think Obvious should be playable. I'm saying this first, but I feel that he should have had more screen time. And also, like people like say that Obvious like had it well good motivations, like this complex motivation of like wanting to better juggle and stuff. And I'm just there. Did I miss something? Because like Obvious well motivation comes from the fact that his dad didn't like him and or like he was a terrible person who didn't like Obvious mother and I'm just you say this is the most complex and interesting Fire Emblem villain motivation. And also I don't like how a lot of Obvious fans say that Edelgard is a worse character than Obvious and or that she has a worse motivation because like say what you want about Edelgard. Obvious whole motivation is the fact that he has daddy issues and also an Oedipus complex.
Mm-hmm.
Edelgard has more interesting motivations and that are more like related to the system is broken and we need to fix it. Obvious like very like when does he say, well, the system is broken? Like, people say that that's the Arvis motivation, but I don't see it. Even in the novelization, the manga adaptation that made me like him slightly more, even there he doesn't have that, well, he wants to fix that broken system and the broken world of Dracula. Like, yeah, Dracula is hell and needs fixing. But Arvis never, like, ugh. But yeah, like, I feel that, like, Arvis is okay for his time, or even really good for his time. But like when you compare him to the more recent villains, and when you think about what the fandom says about him, he isn't that good.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, you can go ahead and say what you want about Orvis.
Okay, I will agree with you. I think he's overrated by the fandom. Like I still really like him. He is somewhere in my top villains, but I don't think he's even close to being the best villain. I think that he's heavily exaggerated by people, and I do agree. Like his presence is so small. Like he literally
Mhm.
shows up in I think like he's prologue, and like a couple of snippets here and there, and then oh hey, I'm killing everyone.
Yeah, basically,
So
like I
yeah.
feel. Then I get why people like Orvis, and like I said, he was really good for his time because before then, Fire Emblem villains were pretty simple. So like when you think about Orvis for his time, he was really good.
Mm-hmm.
But like we aren't in the SNES era anymore, and there have been villains that have been more complex and more interesting and have had his for character but even better executed. So like when you think about it that way and compare like how much time it has passed and how much many other villains we have done since, so that like is why the whole idea that Orvis is the best villain grinds my gears.
Mm-hmm. Something
It's good
something
for
that I thought about that I don't think I've ever heard anyone talk about
Mhm.
is Arvis has a brother, and his brother is one of our units, and that's like that's just never mentioned, other than like, hey, Sigurd, can you take care of my brother? Okay, and then it's just never mentioned again. Like it's just completely
I have
gone.
I have seen a few people like mention the fandom that yeah, Azal is Orvis' brother, but like this is one of those Dracula things where like the characters have like really interesting concepts and ideas, but they aren't really explored on beyond the surface, and that's something that well,
Yeah.
I understand because again, this was made in
Mm-hmm.
SNES era, so they didn't have time to like make it the most complex. At the same time, it like or the hardware capacities. But
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
same time, it really frustrates me because like Dracula has like a lot of the characters in Dracula are like really interesting conceptually. Then they like get like one or two lines of dialogue,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really frustrating.
Yeah, it's definitely it's a much more gameplay heavy Fire Emblem because it only has like what 6 chapters, 6, 7ish around there.
10. It has 11 chapters.
Oh,
They are all big. You
I
like
was.
erased Salif's generation because like Sigurd's generation has
Hmm.
like 6 chapters and
Okay. Oh,
Salif's
that
has
that's
6.
where I was getting 6 from. I was only thinking about Sigurd's. Okay, but anyway,
Yeah, you
point
erased
is it's
Salif
small.
out of existence.
The
You
point,
cannot snap him.
yeah, yeah. Point is it's a small, it's a very small game comparatively speaking to like 23 chapters or 24.
Mm,
But because the chapters are so long, you're taking multiple castles and you're like have
mm.
like the dialogue in between and all of that. It's about the same length as your standard Fire Emblem
Yeah.
game. It's just much more focused on the gameplay side than the
Yeah, like I
story
feel
side.
that Genealogy is like it tells its story through the gameplay, and that's both a good and a bad thing in my opinion. But this
Hmm.
isn't really about the gameplay or the story, so like maybe we shouldn't sidetrack into this.
That's a whole nother hour-long tangent.
Yeah, about like how Fire Emblem like succeed on gameplay and story. Like that could be an entire different podcast if we wanted to.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, be a fun topic actually. But yeah,
Hmm.
like with
But so I
the
do.
idea. Yeah,
Oh, I was gonna say I do agree with you on a lot of aspects regarding him. I still consider him to be a good villain overall, and I
yeah,
just still
I
really
definitely
appreciate
see.
him for what he is and who he is
Yeah,
and what he does. I said that
yeah.
backwards.
Like I feel that I definitely can respect Obvious as a character, and I definitely understand why people like him. Like I won't judge for you liking Obvious. I just personally don't like him, and especially when you compare it to his reputation as one of the best villains in the series. I
Yeah,
don't see it.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But if you like him, if Obvious is one of your favorites, good for you. I support you and I respect your opinion.
Hmm.
As long as you respect the fact that I personally feel that Obvious is a character that, in my opinion, if genealogy of the Holy War gets an echoes treatment, I feel that Obvious is one of the characters that could really benefit a remake. in my opinion, that his characterization
Yeah,
could really
for sure.
benefit everyone
That would help out
from
a
making
lot.
him more complex and more frequent, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, we have talked about Arvis, so let's move on. I think that we're going to talk about Church next. And this is the other one where we disagree because Balin doesn't really like, he thinks they're one of the worst evil wizards, but I love Church. Like, I think they're one of my favorites, honestly. They're one of my personal favorites.
Mm-hmm.
Like, this is the order we can disagree. I'm like, do I start or do you start?
I can start.
Yeah.
Okay, so the reason I very heavily dislike them is because it kind of ties back to the thing about FE4 genealogy just not having a strong story. Since it's so gameplay focused and it's like story told through gameplay, the characters don't get the focus that they deserve, and as a result, these characters are just here. Like, I find that they're so forgettable for me. I don't remember like, most of the members' names. I only remember like I don't know.
Manfred's like the only one that's
Manfroy.
an actual character.
Manfroy's the only one that ever does anything of prominence. Everyone else is just kind of there and stuff.
Yeah, like that's something that I personally don't like about Love Turcos is the fact that Manfroy is the only one that's an actual character.
Yeah.
Everyone else is just like kind of there
Mhm.
and kind of like exists as a boss or something.
Yeah.
And
like,
the fact that a lot of them also reuse the same designs.
oh
That's
yeah,
another thing.
it's so frustrating. Like, I get it, graphical limitations and stuff, but it's just so frustrating when it's supposed to feel like this big group of people, like, you know, this not just organization, but like this dynamic and group of individuals who all believe in the same thing, and then when they all just have reused model, it's like, are you really a big group, or are you just three people pretending to be seven?
Yeah, basically that. Yeah, like I don't think that they should have like made every one of them super memorable. At least having one or two besides Manfroy would have helped a lot.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
this is actually one of the things that I think Ortans did better was like having more characters, like having more actual ones, and just one or two. Like I think that's something that Ortans did better. But yeah, as for the reason that I personally like Lecture Courage, oh boy, like I have a lot of mixed feelings about the role how Willen manipulates behind the scenes and like puppets everything. But personally, the way that Love Your Kirk was pretty good. Like I feel that the way they manipulated was pretty realistic. Like they kind of infiltrated themselves into the picture and they like manipulated bigger parties, and I really like that. I love how like Manfred plays obviously like a fiddle, like that just so delightful. And like the other reason why I absolutely love them is their concept. Like, oh boy, like I love the whole idea that they like live in this evil dragon god, and they were like this tyrannical empire, but then they were defeated, and then the descendants of the said empire, they were oppressed and persecuted because of the fact that their ancestors were evil people, and then they kind of pissed about the fact that they were treated badly and ostracized, so they wanted revenge. And I really loved it as a villain concept. I think it's really cool, and I really hope that Fire Emblem does that concept one day well. We know who I'm talking about here. Yeah, like
that's still like 9 games away.
Yeah, it's 9 games away. We still have a lot of time before we get into the big one. into my like. But yeah, I really like Love Curious as a concept. Like I feel their concept fits well with the universe that's set in, and fits well with Genealogy's themes, and like. I get your idea of like Lapurians like kind of suffering because of the writing, and I kind of agree. Like I said, I feel Manfred is a really cool, manipulative bastard, but also I personally like that Lapurians' involvement is more subtle, that they're like more behind the scenes, and then you see their plans in the second generation. You see what their world plan what's leading up to. And I personally really like that. I like the way how it's more shown. Their actions are more shown rather than told. And I personally think that was cool. And also, this is like going back and forth because like my brain has no focus. But like with their backstory and stuff, like my favorite moment in the entire game is when Sully and Leaving go to the one castle and then they find out that holy shit, they were actual people with like actual lives and find that child's prayer to Lobster, and then you just realize, holy fuck, what have we done?
Yeah.
And that like added an extra layer to it, and that and my first wall motivation. And I feel that Lepturians are like a really good example of like, well, what you were saying with God of Medius, like how a Fire Emblem often has ones who seem simplistic, but then they are actually pretty complex and interesting when you like look at them like more with magnificent glass. And I feel that Upchurch should really fit into that mold because like they seem like an evil wizard cult, and while they work very well for an evil wizard cult, in my opinion, like they do their purpose in the story, and they do it pretty well. What really makes me like them is the fact that they have like an actual motivation and reasons for what they're doing, and it's a really interesting and understandable motivation.
Hmm. Yeah, there's aspects to them that are good. Like I don't think
Yeah,
they're entirely terrible. I just think that it's like a weak foundation, and so it's hard to
mhm.
build up from that. Like they did the best that they
Yeah,
could, and it works for the story. I just really wish there was more.
yeah, like that's the main thing. Like I said with Arvis, so like the Lobturans, well, in my opinion, they don't suffer from it as much. I do get that where you're coming from. Like Genealogy really needs a remake that fleshes out the story. Like you can read the manga adaptation and the novelization, and they do a good job in at fleshing out the story more. But also, it would be really cool to see the uh, an official remake that like tries to flesh out the story.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah. But if we get a remake, I will say this. Please make the uh Mitsuki Ozawa's manga. So that added a lot of things. A lot of questionable things, but also a lot of really cool things. And one of the coolest things it added was giving Manfred a backstory. And it's a really good one that really like explains why he is like that, and also adds to the whole Lobturians were persecuted thing. So like if we get a remake of Genealogy of the Holy War, I really hope that gets added in. Like I would love if like we, because it's just one of my favorite things in the entire franchise, honestly.
Yeah.
Like if the whole how like yeah. He was like once a nice person who got fucked up by the fact that his whole family was killed at stake because of the Valkyrian were hunted down, and he became disfigured of that, and like holy shit, like you understand why that man is fucked up.
Yeah. 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 I really do.
Yeah. That backstory is just really good, and I wish they made it canon. Like if the genealogy of the Holy War remake doesn't have like that backstory made canon, I'm not buying it. This is a half joke. But yeah, yeah. Before I burst from this, let's move on and talk about Trant. I think Trant is the next one, right?
Yes.
Trant is actually one of my personal favorites. Like he doesn't make me go super fellow like with Arcturians or some later characters. But like I really like Trant. I think that while he is a secondary villain, he's really neat.
Yeah.
And I really like his motivation, like the way that he isn't really an evil person, but more or less he is an king who lives in his kingdom is kind of like this harshened warrior race, and they are like from their environment, they are like because of that, they are like have to have this specific personal lifestyle, and that has harshened them. And Torrent really wants the best for his people, and that's why he's really opportunistic, because he thinks the best way to be a good king is like act really powerful and like use people and to get power and to get what they need. And I really like that how Torrent's villainy is more pragmatic. Like he isn't necessarily a bad person; he's just a person who does bad things for the greater good. And I really like that. He isn't like the super major or most important villain, but I think that he gets decent amount of characterization, and his motivations and characterization are pretty interesting. And that's what like makes him one of my favorites, because he's really cool. And also I love his design. I think he's a really handsome man who rides in a really handsome dragon.
Yeah, yeah. I think he's a really solid secondary villain, because he has. What I like about him is that he sort of has his own motivations and desires apart from the main villains. Like he's not just working with them because a lot of times there's like the loyalty aspect, like, oh, I'm loyal to the king, or I'm loyal to the country.
Basically,
but he's doing it for his own needs and his own reasons.
Yeah. This made me realize that we haven't talked about Camus' archetypes yet, or like Camus himself. So like I guess that when we come to a Camus, we can talk more about the Camuses as well. Yeah, like with Trevant, I really like how his motivation actually adds more realism to the world. It adds more layers. That's something that I thought was really cool. It makes the world feel more alive because he is more separated.
Yeah, I like him. He works the role that he has well, and he just he's a fun character. He's likable.
Yeah, he's really cool. He has a cool dragon, has a cool design, and his personality is pretty memorable, and motivations are good. So yeah, solid 8/9 out of 10, and one of my personal favorites because I love handsome men who ride on dragons. And also are more anti-villain than actual villains. That too. Like he was made for me.
You'll be able to pick up the trends on which characters we like eventually.
I think when we continue this. Yeah, now that we have talked about Dragon, I think we have like Ishtar and Chelios.
Yeah.
And also the evil witch Hilda, if we want to talk about her, but like Genealogy has a lot of villains.
Genealogy has so many villains, and they're not all that good.
Yeah, like Genealogy has like a lot of like key armies. Like some are good, some are bad, and some are in between.
Yeah, there's definitely there's good ideas and there's good structure there. Because Genealogy is a fan favorite game. Everyone loves it, and for good reasons. It's a good game. It's very solidly written. It has fun gameplay. It's challenging. Several reasons why you would like it. But there's also so many flaws that I just feel kind of get overlooked.
Yeah, like I feel like Genealogy is like it has a lot of good ideas, but it doesn't have like that much meat to those ideas, like in the story. Like, it has a lot of like good bone, but not really much meat to chew on. Or alternatively, it's like one of those things that's perfect for fan fiction because there are a lot of ideas that are really good but aren't that really well explored. So you can like either read or write fan fictions about it. I feel it's one of those games. It has a lot of good ideas, but they aren't explored to their fullest. So it's like fanfictional. Yeah, I feel that HR is next, right?
Yes.
Yeah, she's one of the better ones. She's one of the better ones in Genealogy. Like, she's sympathetic, she's understandable, she's very cute, she's, you understand, she's one of those characters who's like, she could be a good person, but she fights on the wrong side. And that makes her tragic and pretty sad character. But also, she couldn't never join you because she's so loyal to her family and so loyal to Julius that she, even if she thinks some things they're doing are in the wrong, she doesn't want to like switch sides because she's so loyal to them. And she values the people she loves above all else. And I think that's makes her a tragic character. It also helps that she's a recurring character, that she just doesn't show up once and then dies, but that you actually encounter her and fight her multiple times. So I
Mm-hmm.
feel that's another reason she works well because, like, as we talked about, a lot of villains in Genealogy only like appear short amount of times. But Ishtar is like an exception that she appears a bit more. So I feel that's another reason why she works really well.
Yeah, I really like her. She's probably my second favorite villain in Genealogy. Like she's a
Who's your
good written character. She plays a good role. She has that level of sympathy. She's a likable character, and she has a good relationship not just to the other villains, but also like the interactions we see, the minimal ones, but the interactions we see her have with our side. There's a lot there.
Teeny? Actually, like I really like how like the Reach House has like both heroic characters like Teeny and Arthur and Talishu, but
Mm-hmm.
also like it has antagonistic characters, like both those really ruthless ones, like Hector or Hilda, but also more sympathetic ones like Ishtar or Ishtar. Like
Yeah.
that really adds more layers to it. And that's really like I think that Ishtar is a really good character because like she is a character that could be our side, but she's also really she can't be, and that makes her tragic and sympathetic. And like with Odin, without the well we knew her before aspect. And that's like what I really like about Ishtar. She's really and also she has a really pretty design. She's a very pretty lady. And I like pretty ladies. I'm
her
very
design
bisexual.
her design
She's
is
very
nice.
pretty.
I really like it.
Yeah. Also, I feel with Ishtar because like we haven't talked about them before, but before because she's basically a female Camus. So before we move on to Julius, should we talk about Camuses first? Camuses as
Um,
well, or do we like wait till another Camus comes along?
I think we can just wait until like a stronger example since we kind of
Yeah,
skipped over that in the beginning.
yeah. Like we committed the Camus error, sir. We committed the Camus error, sir.
Uh, that
We
moment
committed.
that moment when it's one of my favorite archetypes and I forgot about it.
Yeah, it's just one of those examples. We just like. Also, we forgot Michalis too. Like we forgot like Thomas and Michalis. We forgot both about them because they were that important in the grand scheme of things.
I like Shadow Dragon. It's one of my favorite games. How did I forget about them?
Yeah, sometimes things like that happen. Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
we should just move on to Julius. Like Julius is like one of those characters in Fire Emblem. There are a few that are like really cool conceptually, really interesting conceptually. They do barely any shit with them. Like I really love the idea that he's basically this antichrist or that like this result of an unholy marriage that was like plotted by the Lapterians, and that he's basically a vessel was raised to become a vessel to basically Satan in Dragon form. And I really love that. That's a really interesting concept, but they barely do anything with it or explore him as a character. Is that he's just basically this evil kid who like has god powers and is this very I'm evil because and I'm going to destroy everything. I'm the avatar of the evil dragon. Like he is one of the cooler characters conceptually, but he isn't really explored much. And I get why. Again, genealogy has a lot of limitations when it comes to its storytelling. But Bill is one of the characters that suffers the most from the limitations genealogy has.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I really dislike him a lot more than most people do. Just because
Oh,
it's not that I dislike him, it's more so I dislike how basic he is. Cuz
yeah,
it's really just the cult raised me to be evil, and it's kind of
yeah.
all there
Basically,
is to
like
it.
he doesn't really have that much depth to him. And again, I feel that he's one of the more wasted potential examples because like having the wall basically raised to become Satan is really interesting as a concept, but like he's just really generic as an execution. Like he's just a villain who's evil for the sake of it. And I kind of get why, because again, that was how he was raised. I wish he had more character depth. And sure, like one of the things that I actually dislike is the implication of like, oh, he was a nice kid, but then the dragon killed his well self and possessed him, like what Julia says. And that's something that I actually dislike because, like, I really hope that it is in the well. Oh, he was actually nice, but then he got killed. Because, like, I really don't like that trope of a character being nice, but then being they're evil. Like, I really have the character actually be more flawed than nuanced. Like, what we talk about Harding, the reason why Harding worked is because he already was a flawed person and had flawed desires, and that's why he was able to be possessed because he was already a flawed being. But with Julius, it's either he was raised from Buddha or Satan, or he was once a nice kid, but then the dragon killed him and made him just his meat puppet. I kind of like the former because like it at least like brings the whole nature versus nurture thing, but the latter is just kind of pop out to me. Other interpretation.
Yeah.
Like the former at least has more potential, like, and makes him a more autonomous character. The latter is just kind of yeah. As for Lopter himself, I think he's fine. He's like one of the weaker evil dragons, but he's fine.
Yeah. I wish there was like more lore. Cuz like
Yeah, there is a bit more in the novelization. I highly recommend it. It like has like a 30-page long prologue that like tells about the Lopturian Empire and the rise and fall of it, and it goes a bit more in depth into Loptur, and that was really cool and one of the cooler things the novel did. Like, I wish in the game, like, this is one of the reasons why Genealogy needs a remake so badly.